politics of fear and hate are wrong. We love you and politics of compassion
But America,
and love are right.
we are not going back.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Raise Red Living Blue podcast. I'm your host, Jason Will. I am going to be doing our first ever solo episode today. I've been wanting to do these, or one of these, for a while now, but just been kind of struggling to find a good topic. You know, it's hard to do these when you don't have somebody either with you on Zoom or in the room to be conversational with, but I think I've got some pretty good talking points centered around a Facebook page that I was using for real estate that I just recently converted to the Raise Red Living Blue Facebook page. And I had been using this as a community Facebook page prior to. It had reached 25,000 plus or minus followers. So it had a pretty big following, biggest following of any social media platform that I've ever created or maintained. Even though I'm no longer working as a real estate agent in the Fairhope marketplace, I will still gladly help people that want to work with me on the buying and selling side in Fairhope, but just not an active market. I'm about 4.5 hours north of that market. And so, there's just not a whole lot of opportunity there because I'm not actively boots on the ground trying to drum up business and sadly not maintaining relationships like I should, but that's another story. So I make posts on this Facebook page because I get a little money every month from Meta, and it doesn't take a whole lot of time. I'm basically sharing other people's content, and I'm doing a lot of business promotions and just, supporting a lot of the restaurants there in Fairhope that I still love and miss. And it's a win-win, right? Now we're getting close to the time of year of one of my favorite events in Fairhope, and that's the lighting of the trees ceremony. They put lights in all the trees in downtown Fairhope, and it's just absolutely gorgeous. And it's just a really fun, event, and it makes the city look beautiful. And so I was sharing some prior photography from a ceremony, in years past that I'd taken or had somebody take some drone photos of the city and just all lit up. And so it was amazing. But I made the post and I guess, politicized it by saying, we've got something to really look forward to, or isn't it good to have something to really look forward to in this dumpster fire of a year, which has been 2025. So that ignited a firestorm of comments about how 2025 has been a great year. What am I talking about? Yada, yada, yada. And I'm thinking, man, if 2025 has been a great year for you, you're not just a Republican, you're a diehard MAGA Republican, or you're in that top 10%, top earners, top income earners in the United States. You're white, you hate liberals, and you love the fact that, this administration is so vocal with just hammering liberals as being haters of America, as being evil, supporters of political violence, domestic terrorism, illegal immigrants, crime, you name it, right? You got the KKK Barbie coming on her podium in the White House press room, just spouting lies and misinformation and just really divisive rhetoric from the podium there. And so it just pissed me off that these people were like, this is the greatest 2025, it's been awesome. And so I was like, you know what? I'm gonna turn this into a Facebook page for Raise Red Living Blue, which is a big step because being a real estate agent and speaking out on the blue team is a big no-no, right? You can do it on the red team. I've got real estate friends that do it all the time. They'll say some pretty despicable things about the left and no harm, no foul. For us on the blue team, it's not the same. It's a double standard. But the more we've been doing this, the more we've been creating episodes, putting content out on Instagram and TikTok, just the more emboldened I've gotten. The more the Trump administration pushes the authoritarian envelope, continues to advance that line in the sand towards a very dictator-like democracy as opposed to the democracy as our founding fathers intended, just the more fired up I get. I'm like, I got to speak out. And also, I've got some guests coming on the show that are Alabamians that have massive followings on TikTok, 100,000 plus, 400,000 plus. And I've had conversations with these folks, in our pre-podcast conversations, getting our questions together, and they've really fired me up. It's like, we need more of us need to be outspoken. We need to do more and not just sit on the sidelines. And they've put a lot of things at risk, like personal relationships, family relationships, but they really feel like, this is a calling for them. It's a responsibility for them. And, I'm starting to fall into that boat too. But since I've converted this Facebook page, we lost about 1,000 followers. So we went from 25,000 followers to 1,000 followers just basically overnight. But there have been some really interesting comments. Now, this is something I'm passionate about, so I've been really active on this page. And before, I'd maybe make like a couple posts a week, here and there. Sometimes I'd go a week or two without even posting on the page. So it's very inconsistent, but I'm very consistent with the stories, the reels, the posts, the engagement with the people that are commenting. So very, very active site. And I wanted to share with you some of the responses I'm getting to the post. And I want to preface that by saying I'm inviting these people, or some of them, actively inviting them to come on the podcast. I do this on my Clip Talk political TikTok page that I'm just sharing basically snippets, clips from the news and things that are happening in the world of politics. And nobody has taken me up on that offer as of yet. So that's very, very sad. But working on that. And if you're listening to this and want to come on and debate me, I here's my goal is that you know, we keep it civil. We don't talk over each other. And we will need to get on a phone call, have a conversation about maybe like 5 talking points. So if you're diehard MAGA, you got 5 things that you love that Trump has done in this first year of his presidency. Or you got 5 things you hate about liberals. Just, whatever it is. We'll review those and I'm, going to hear you out, give you a chance to address each one of those and provide some commentary on my end. And it should be hopefully pretty civil and pretty valuable. Where the goal is not to change anybody's minds, it's just to I want to hear your side of the story. This is very much, I would say, I'm inspired by Charlie Kirk and what he was doing prior to his untimely death, which I condemn wholeheartedly and was shocked when I learned about it like real time. So let's honor Charlie's legacy by keeping the dialogue going. I want to get into conversation with you and to hear you out. Some of these comments are outrageous, and I would just love to know what is the reasoning behind some of these comments. So the first one I wanted to address is I made a post about RFK Jr. I feel like RFK Jr. is a disaster. I feel like Trump has, a lot of unqualified cabinet members. I just think there's an overwhelming amount of evidence that has proven since the administration took office that these folks are out of their league, overwhelmed, not qualified, and really destroying the cabinet posts and the lives, these institutions, the lives of the people that have worked for, in some cases decades, just donated their life to, this work. And he's just come in and wiped them out, fired them, changed the culture, totally changed the course of where like things like CDC research and what we should be focused on in terms of preparedness and readiness, like the measles. There's a measles outbreak. I mean, there should be nobody in America with measles. So I think there's a lot of scientific proof that could back up my statement that RFK Jr. is a complete disaster. And he is really bad for the overall public health of Americans. And certainly, God forbid, we have another outbreak or pandemic, or there's some new flu like the bird flu or something that just starts wiping us all out. This guy's not going to know what to do. He's going to tell us to take vitamins, get out in the sunshine, you know, certainly not get vaccinated or quarantine, much less wear a mask. Here's what I have come to understand, though, about the MAGA audience that is at least, engaging with me so far, is they are outraged. They are outraged by Fauci. They feel like Fauci is an evil person that created this pandemic, some out of thin air. Like it's just like COVID's just a iteration of the common cold. You've got people that feel like, we were, bending the knee to King Fauci. I don't really know what they thought the end game was, whether that was to insert us all with computer chips or the COVID vaccine was a way for the government to track us because they're embedding, trackable chips into our bodies. Here's what I would say to you if you were a guest on the podcast and we were talking about your big hot button issue wanted to be COVID-19, how that pandemic was handled by both the Trump administration and the Biden administration. And we just kind of talk it out, whether, you thought it was a very minor thing, if you're skeptical, it was even a real thing. I don't know. We would just talk it out. I want to hear your perspective on it, but here is my perspective on it. And this is what I find to be the case with a lot of folks in the MAGA sphere is that they don't understand that United States is not the entire planet. Like we are a global society as it relates to things like healthcare, specifically pandemic related healthcare, outbreaks, flus, things like that, right? So things spread across the globe. Equally, the economy. They feel like, the US economy is something that exists independently from the rest of the world, whereas I would argue that we have a global economy. So when I look at COVID-19, I saw a global pandemic. We saw on the news, on the daily, people in body bags from multiple countries. Lots and lots of people died as a result of this. So I look at that stuff locally and then I look at it globally and say to myself, this is not something that was a hoax. That's just a terrible way to describe it. And that's, sadly what the president does to really ignite the skepticism of his base is just call something a hoax when there is clearly a lot of, in this case, a lot of scientific evidence and a lot of recorded deaths to prove that it was not. I look at COVID-19 as something that we did not know how to handle, and we took preventative measures. And maybe some of those preventative measures were too extreme. We just didn't know. It is so easy to Monday morning quarterback this and say, "Oh, we did this wrong, we did that wrong." And I get it, school children suffered. A lot of school children really got behind as a result of not being able to be at school. This at home online learning, a lot of it was a joke. It's not the same. It's not that immersive learning environment, but socially they suffered. Academically, they certainly suffered. Businesses suffered. Restaurants, a lot of them went out of business, but it was just, again, it was something we did not know how to handle. Now, moving forward, I think we're going to be, if we face, God forbid, we face that situation again, I think we're going to be much better off because we're going to know how to handle it. We're going to know how to get our messaging right. But, they were flying by the seat of their pants and just doing the best that they could. But their ultimate goal was to save as many lives as possible, to protect the American people as best they could. And sometimes, yeah, maybe that advice they were giving, it changed, day to day, week to week, month to month. They'd say, do this. Then they'd say, oh, you can do this. they'd say do that, and they say, oh, don't do that. So it just changed, and people were, got frustrated. I understand. The problem is the deep state conspiracy theories, that run wild over this stuff. And I think at the root of it, people just want to get pissed off at liberals. So this is a finger pointing exercise, and this is a big hot button topic where they can just continue to point the finger and go, this is why we don't want a liberal in the White House, because they don't know how to run the country in the best interest of the people. Just look at how Biden handled COVID-19. So I would just push back on that with common sense, really, right? Like, especially if you're not a scientist or a doctor, should you really be making, comments, assertions about something that you are totally, like, speaking of unqualified, totally unqualified to cover? But here's what I want to say before we go to break is that this post, as outrageous as it was, as ignorant as it was, may have just been intentional rage bait. So I don't know how serious this person is, but they were serious enough to make a public, a comment on a public forum. All right, so a public platform, and their name is associated with that. And who knows what consequences could come of it, other than the fact that somebody may lose respect for you that previously had it before they read this statement that you made. All right, so let's go to break, and we will pick this up on the other side.
Hey, fellow Blue Dots, we would love for you to connect with us on social media. We're on Instagram at raisedredlivingblue_pod and TikTok at raisedred_livingblue. Okay, back to the episode.
All right, welcome back, everybody. We are talking about Facebook comments that I'm getting from MAGA folks out there that have just really, I don't know if I should say I'm surprised by them, but I mean, they're shocking. To me, they are shocking that people actually believe this. It's shocking to me that they would feel comfortable posting this on a very public platform like Facebook, where for any and all to see. We're talking about RFK Jr. and vaccines. First, the next talking point that I'm going to cover in this episode is about Putin. Okay, I have seen clips from live MAGA rally interviews where multiple people on camera are openly admitting that they would rather, if they had a choice between Biden and Putin, they would choose Putin. So we'll get into that in a second. But right now, we're talking about a gentleman, and I'm not going to out these people because I just don't want to give them the attention that I think they crave. For a lot of these folks, I mean, very seldom, if ever so far since the transformation of the page, has somebody on the right come with like documented facts. They don't cite sources for their information. They're just vomiting these crazy conspiracy theories and just wild talking points. A lot of them they get directly from the president and the administration. I don't know if there's like MAGA chat rooms. I don't know, but it's crazy stuff. But this one person just had a simple one-liner comment to my post about RFK being dangerous to the public health of Americans. And he was just like, ha ha ha, you think vaccines actually work. All right. That I was like, what? And again, as I said before we went to break, a lot of this stuff is rage bait. Instagram, TikTok, Facebook comments, when it's political in nature, this person just could have been just trying to wind my clock, right? And that's fine. I'll deal with it because it helps. I don't want to cancel anybody. I don't want to silence anybody. I'm all for free speech, and it helps the algorithm, right? It's going to help me reach more people. So I wanted to just come back with a data-driven response publicly to this person. And just a little side note, there have been a few people who I've engaged with on this Facebook page, the Raise Red Living Blue Facebook page, that have just gotten so frustrated with my data that they have blocked the page. They've come out and said something outrageous. I have just immediately debunked it with actual facts and then they're like, oh, to hell with this, I can't deal with your facts. That's really, really sad because, who knows? I know people that are, and I believe this, I don't feel like this is dramatic when we refer to, MAGA as being cult like. I really feel like it's fair to say that it at least has a lot of cult like similarities. But I do believe it's a cult if you just dive into a little bit of research, just Google like what's a cult, what typically, how to, cult leaders actually build a following. You'll find a lot of similarities in that research and what's presently going on with MAGA. So sadly, some of these folks have dropped off. Some of them are hanging around. I appreciate that, but I always want to have a data-driven approach. If you come on the podcast and want to provide an opposing opinion, I'm not going to require you to bring data. I will probably call you out on the fact that you didn't bring any data or any sources, or your information doesn't come from a credible journalistic person, platform, outlet, TV station, what have you. I'm going to give you some data right now, and then I'm going to give you the source, okay? I am researching so you can just Google this. And I do this a lot on the Facebook page, by the way. I will say, listen, use Google, use use whatever search engine you want, but you ask the search engine, and most of them are connected to, an AI that feature that is just going to just do this very quick and very broad deep dive into everything that is published online in terms of research, and they're going to provide you with a lot of data. And I just encourage people, I'm like, what are you Googling that? Like, Google didn't tell you that vaccines haven't saved lives, right? That Google's not going to tell you that. So it's just interesting. But since 1994, this comes from the CDC. Since 1994, routine childhood vaccines in the US have prevented approximately 508 million illnesses, 32 million hospitalizations, and well over 1 million deaths. So well over 1 million lives have been saved from vaccines. And this person is telling me that, or ridiculing me for believing that vaccines actually work. Okay. So for preventable diseases, and what makes them preventable in the first place is the vaccine. All right. So in the period of time before 1980, there's been a 92% decline in cases and a 99% decline in deaths after vaccines became widespread in the United States. Now, again, I mentioned that we are a global society. Okay, so globally, vaccines have saved an estimated 154 million lives over the past 50 years. 154 million lives. All right, now let's get to COVID-19, because this is the hot button topic, right? This is what gets people just all worked up. It's very politicized, it's very partisan. But let's break it down. In the US, all right, just talk about the US, COVID-19 vaccinations, there's been an estimated averted 2.5 million deaths. Okay, so since COVID-19 started to ravage our nation, right, it is estimated that 2.5 million deaths were averted, or lives saved as a result of that vaccine. I mean, that's huge, right? So I just want to encourage everyone to just do some research on this. Watch the 60 Minutes interview with Dr. Fauci and just hear him in his own words. Just try to put yourself in a state of mind, a neutral state of mind, where you're just doing what Charlie Kirk preached and hearing the other side out. Okay. And after doing so, if you still have the opinion that Fauci was some lunatic who was trying to destroy America, at least you gave it an effort. Right now, you're just accepting what you're hearing from the magosphere, and you're basing your beliefs on opinions that are negative, that are false, not credible, can easily be debunked, have no basis in fact, yada, yada, yada. Okay?
Hey, fellow Blue Dots, don't forget you can find all of our episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Please hit that subscribe button, and we would love a review. Okay, now back to the episode.
All right. So just to be clear, there's been a lot of rhetoric in terms of comments to what I'm posting on the Raised Red Living Blue Facebook page that have given me pause, right? That are shocking. These are just two examples, right? If you guys are getting some value out of this, I don't know, maybe we'll keep going with this as a consistent episode here and there when we need to fill some gaps. But the second thing I wanted to get to is this notion that a lot of MAGAs seem to share, that they would much rather prefer Putin to be the leader of America if given the choice between Putin and a Democratic candidate for president, which to me is like just a whole nother level of disturbing. So I had this one lady, and this is, I mean, it really shocks me when women do this, okay? But I had this one lady comment. She said, well, she would choose Putin, and her justification for it was, well, at least Putin has morals. What? I mean, this is not only a question for me at a crossroads like this between reality and like the Twilight Zone. I'm like, where? It's bigger than where are these people getting their information from? It's like what is happening? Like what has affected you so severely that mentally you could come to grips with a statement, like making a statement like that on a public forum? Hell, just holding that as a belief, it is crazy to me. Okay, so we're talking about somebody who kills people, innocent people, people that just disagree with him, tortures people, just really like inhumane interrogation methods in support of Russian law enforcement, really maintaining power. This is a person who rules over a society where there is a serious lack of freedoms. There certainly isn't free speech. It is not. I mean, there are people that speak out. Those people that speak out are punished. I mean, literally, they are disappeared. And this is why you start to see people making comparisons between what's going on in America to what's going on in some of these other under some of these authoritarian, the leadership of these authoritarian regimes is, there's cruel treatment, there is violence. We see ICE agents slamming women to the ground. I mean, what is that all about? Of course, we're not seeing anything to the extent of what Putin and his minions have done to the citizens of their country. But wow, do we really want to even stick a toe in that water? Do we want to go down that road even just a little bit? I don't think so. I just can't even relate to where somebody would come from in supporting somebody, much less saying somebody has higher morals than, let's say, Biden, where Putin is executing on like political murders. There's mysterious deaths, poisonings. He's silencing his people. I don't see where Biden did any of that. Biden had his faults, but we're talking about an old man who had the best interests of the country at heart. But let's stick with Ukraine because MAGAs really get fired up about Ukraine. And I don't know if you're just unaware, if you tune it out, if you don't believe it or you just don't want to hear it. But Putin, since the war began, has made it a routine, game plan, war plan to target civilians. I mean, it is a pattern to the extent where you cannot argue successfully that it's an accident. Okay, he's bombing schools, hospitals, when they're invading, when Russian forces are invading, you know, territories in Ukraine, they're murdering civilians. I mean, there's been all of this evidence of crimes against humanity, but, they're using drones, they're using civilians to train Russian drone pilots. So it's like a human safari campaign. They're targeting women walking home from the grocery store, men riding bikes. The drones will just come by and use them as target practice. If you're not aware of that, and I'm making you aware of it now, and you've held these beliefs that Putin would be a better leader than anybody the Democratic Party could put forward in terms of a presidential leader, man, you need to do some deep introspection inside yourself and go, man, what's wrong with me? Am I suffering from some mental illness? Do I need some mental health? The European Court of Human Rights has found that Russia has committed gross and systemic human rights violations in Ukraine, not only murder, but sexual violence and torture. I mean, this is out of control. Russia bombs their energy grids, causing blackouts. It gets cold over there. So people have suffered and passed away due to exposure to extreme temperatures. As I've mentioned, he has bombed hospitals, schools. Let's add theaters, civilian shelters. He bombed, as an example, in Mariupol. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly or not, but he bombed a theater that was known to be sheltering civilians. And they're making claims like what we hear out of Hamas, that, underneath these theater is, an operation led by the Ukrainian military, which has never been proven. There's been no evidence. So they are using cluster munitions in residential areas. That's inherently indiscriminate and devastating to civilian populated areas. And I could go on and on, but let me give you just some other references. Okay. So the UN, all right. So the UN has found Russia guilty of crimes against humanity. The UN Rights Office has repeatedly warned civilians, warned the world that Russia is violating international law and executing, performing war crimes. Putin can't leave Russia because he's designated around the world, in a lot of places around the world, as a war criminal. That's why people on my side of the aisle were outraged when we literally rolled out the red carpet for him in Alaska. This is a war criminal. This is somebody who is on a human rights watch list. His attacks of civilians has been so widespread and not even just consistent, but continually escalated, that it just remains a point of not just contention, but it's disturbing, it's wrong. And that's why I just think there should be overwhelming support for Ukraine, and there should be overwhelming military support. And even, I mean, I would support, this is how crazy leftist I am, I would support boots on the ground protecting these people from these atrocities, because it's gotten so bad. I mean, we did it in the First World Wars. Why wouldn't we do it here? I mean, Putin's out of his mind. All he does is threaten. To deter us from giving the Ukrainians long range Tomahawk missiles, or putting European and American boots on the ground, he uses his nuclear arsenal to deter that. He uses threats of using nuclear bombs to deter us from supporting these people who are just being decimated militarily and from a civilian standpoint. So let's just compare that to any Democratic president. Of course they've made their mistakes. Of course they're not perfect, but What Democratic president has ever ordered the mass killings of a civilian population? Tell me that. I mean, help me understand where you're coming from here. Help me understand where you're framing your argument. So let's frame the conversation around this as we wrap up this episode. If morals meant anything, would there be bombing of hospitals? Would there be bombing of aid convoys? Would they literally be hunting women walking home from the grocery store with their drones? If morals were any part of Putin's character, personal resume, would it be targeting civilians? Would he be executing, creating war crimes? If we were declaring or comparing rather a Democratic presidential candidate to a President Putin of the United States, where would the pros outweigh the cons? I mean, I just think morality is not only is it a not a valid argument, it is a ridiculous argument. But what say you? Let me hear leave us a comment wherever you can. Send me a DM, send me a text, get engaged with the new Facebook page at Raised Red Living Blue on Facebook. You can find us on TikTok, Instagram. Tell me where you're coming from, but please provide some historical data reference, something that adds a little bit of validity to your assertion that Putin is a better leader, would be a better leader of not only Russia, Ukraine, America, Poland, Finland, wherever, but an American leader, a leader of our country who has a history of being a violator of human rights, of torturing innocent people, murdering innocent people, poisoning innocent people, much less people that speak out against him. I'm fascinated by the MAGA mindset. It's one of the reasons why I created the Facebook page. It's one of the reasons why I do this podcast. Your mindset and how you have established your belief system to where this totally makes sense to you baffles me. So would love to hear from you. I appreciate you tuning in wherever that may be, whether in the podcast format or in the clips that we cut up and share across social media. Thanks so much for joining us. If you are enjoying this podcast, it would mean the world if you would follow us, give us a follow, and leave a review and a rating. Very important to us reaching a broader audience. Again, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll be back real soon. I'm telling you, I'm putting together, we're working on scheduling and everything, but I've got a stacked lineup of guests coming to you here in the future. So stay tuned.
Politics of fear and hate are wrong. We love you and politics of
But America